setting Noahide laws.
Why don't we proselytize?
To a certain extent.
To a certain extent. Okay, so now you put it well. Proselytize can mean, in our case, can mean one of two things. That is, try to convince people to become Jewish, or try to convince non-Jews to live up to the Jewish laws for non-Jews.
Is it really just two things? It seems to me there are three distinct types of outreach in Jewish thought and practice. 1. Encouraging non-Jews to convert to Judaism. 2. Promoting the Noahide laws, Judaism's moral code for non-Jews. 3. Kiruv, bringing non-observant Jews closer to religious observance. Let's break these down. 1. Converting non-Jews to Judaism. This is virtually non-existent today. There is no widespread movement among Jews to actively go out and convert non-Jews. It's not only rare, in most circles it's even discouraged. Many Jews will say, "You don't need to become Jewish to be righteous," which is true but frequently misleading. So when people say Jews don't proselytize, this is the part they're usually referring to, and it's completely accurate. 2. Promoting the Noahide laws. This is a bit more common, but still remarkably obscure. The Noahide laws are said to be a set of 7 moral categories of laws given to all humanity, according to Jewish tradition. Promoting them to non-Jews is technically a form of proselytization, just not one that necessarily involves formal conversion. But even here, outreach is limited. Most people, including many religious Jews, don't know much about the Noahide laws. And among non-Jews? Most have never even heard the term. There are a handful of rabbis and organizations that promote Noahide teachings to non-Jews, especially online. But the movement is tiny. There is no real effort to mainstream it or make it part of a broader global dialogue. So while this is technically a form of Jewish outreach, it's very niche and low visibility. 3. Kiruv, reaching non-religious Jews. This is where the real activity lies. Kiruv, the effort to bring secular or less observant Jews back into traditional Jewish practice, is widespread, particularly in Orthodox and Chabad circles. There are many programs, lectures, events, and social media campaigns designed for internal outreach. But even this, while significant within the Jewish world, is not the kind of proselytization the average outsider thinks of. It's more of an intra-communal revival movement than global religious outreach. So do Jews proselytize? Technically, yes, but mostly to their own. So when people ask, why don't Jews proselytize? It's a valid question. From the outside, it really does seem like Judaism keeps to itself. Jews are not trying to convert the world. Most non-Jews have no clue what Judaism teaches, and few Jews are trying to change that. Even Noahide promotion is rare and virtually unknown outside tight religious circles. So while there is outreach in modern Judaism, it's largely inward-facing. It might still be called proselytizing, but only in the most limited sense. Is this a good thing? That is what we will discuss.
Which does not mean becoming Jewish. Now, we don't proselytize to become Jewish because there's no obligation on a non-Jew to become a Jew.
This is fundamentally true, and a crucial theological distinction in Judaism. When you read the Hebrew Bible, you'll notice something important. Non-Jews are not commanded to become Jewish. There is no universal mandate for conversion. While we see individuals joining the nation of Israel, these are personal decisions, not global requirements. Conversion, if we can call it that, is allowed. But it is not demanded of the world. Being Jewish does not claim exclusive access to moral living or salvation. What is expected of non-Jews? While the Bible does not require non-Jews to become Jewish, it does make one thing absolutely clear. Non-Jews are still expected to be moral. Let's look at 2 major examples. 1. Sodom and Gomorrah. These were not Jewish cities. They predate the giving of the Torah and are outside the Israelite covenant. And yet, they are judged and destroyed by God. Why? Ezekiel 16:49-50 gives us a clear explanation. Now this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and complacent. They did not help the poor and needy. Thus they were haughty and committed abominations before me. Therefore I removed them, as you have seen. So what do we learn? Non-Jews are expected to care for the poor. They are expected to avoid arrogance and excess. So even character traits of non-Jews matters to God. They are accountable for immoral actions, even without being Jewish. There is a clear divine moral standard. and it applies to all people. 2. The generation of Noah. Before Abraham, before Moses, before Israel, the world was entirely non-Jewish. And yet, Genesis 6:13 says, "So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them." This shows again, universal moral expectations predate Judaism. God expected people, all people, to live justly. When they didn't, they were held accountable. So while Jews usually don't proselytize with the message, "You must become one of us to be saved," that does not mean Judaism teaches moral relativism or indifference to ethics outside the community. Being Jewish is not necessary, but being moral is. And non-Jews, according to the biblical narrative, are very much under divine moral obligation. It is therefore obvious that Jews should be committed to uplifting not only their own ethics, but the ethics of the nations. If God cares about the morality of the nations, then so should we.
Even though it would be very good for him, but it's no obligation. So I can't come to him and say, the creator of the universe wants you to become Jewish. I cannot say that to him.
This statement raises a serious tension in the Jewish approach to conversion. On the one hand, it acknowledges that becoming Jewish is very good for a non-Jew. On the other hand, it insists that Jews should not promote or advocate for this very good thing. That's hard to reconcile. If it's good, why not promote it? Let's apply basic logic. If something is genuinely beneficial for someone, shouldn't we at least inform them about it? Shouldn't we encourage them to consider it, especially in matters as important as the soul, morality, and relationship with God? Judaism teaches that conversion to the Jewish faith is not necessary for salvation or divine favor. Fair enough. But when it's also admitted that conversion is very good for the individual, that creates a dilemma. If it's so good, why the silence? Worse, why the resistance? In many Jewish communities, potential converts are discouraged repeatedly before they're even allowed to begin the conversion process. While this is often meant to test sincerity, it borders on contradiction when paired with the belief that conversion is spiritually enriching. Jewish tradition does praise converts. This isn't just a modern opinion. Classical Jewish texts explicitly support the value of conversion. In Pesahim 87b, the Talmud says, "And Rabbi Elazar said, the Holy One, blessed be he, exiled Israel among the nations only so that converts would join them, as it is stated, and I will sow her to me in the land." Hosea 2:25. Does a person sow a seah of grain for any reason other than to bring in several kor of grain during the harvest? So too, the exile is to enable converts from the nations to join the Jewish people. And Rabbi Yohanan said that this idea may be derived from here. "And I will have compassion upon her that had not received compassion. And I will say to them that were not my people, you are my people." Hosea 2:25. Even those who were initially not my people, i.e. Gentiles, will convert and become part of the Jewish nation. This implies that the divine purpose behind exile was partly to allow Gentiles the opportunity to encounter Judaism and choose to join it. So the tradition clearly values sincere conversion. It sees it not as a threat or compromise, but as a fulfillment of prophecy and divine purpose. Missed opportunities in the modern world. Now let's look at reality. The Jewish people have been scattered around the world for centuries. That dispersion has allowed countless people across every continent to learn about Jews and Judaism. And yet, what has been done with this opportunity? For the most part, very little. There is no major outreach program encouraging non-Jews to consider Judaism. Many rabbis actively discourage conversion, even from sincere seekers. The average person still knows next to nothing about Judaism, beyond surface stereotypes. That's a tragedy. It's not about pressuring people or evangelizing aggressively. It's about offering an informed spiritual alternative and helping those who are genuinely curious take the next step. The incoherence of the current approach. If you believe something is spiritually true, personally transformative, and very good for someone, then logically you should encourage it, not hide it. Judaism needs to reconcile this tension. Either conversion is good, and it should be treated as a viable, honored option for seekers, or it isn't truly beneficial, in which case the praise for converts and divine purpose of exile makes little sense. But tradition clearly teaches the first. So the current reluctance to promote conversion seems incoherent, even contradictory. A balanced alternative. No one is suggesting Jews should become annoyingly aggressive evangelical missionaries, but there is a middle ground between silence and coercion. Teach clearly what Judaism is, Make conversion accessible to those who are sincere. Stop discouraging seekers out of cultural fear or insularity. Trust that truth doesn't need to be hidden. It just needs to be explained honestly. Helping someone make a well-informed choice about their spiritual life, especially if that choice could be very good for them, is not just acceptable, it's the responsible and ethical thing to do.
Number one. Number two, between you and me, I'm sure this is not being recorded, it's dangerous. You know, if you go after people and make them Jewish, typically they're coming from some other religion. Well, the other religions don't like that.
This statement is frankly bizarre and pathetic, not just for its fear-driven tone, but for how utterly divorced it is from reality, particularly in the modern Western context. Let's be clear. The speaker is an academic, a rabbi with a PhD in mathematical logic from Brandeis University, who later became an associate professor of philosophy at Johns Hopkins. This is not an uneducated individual, and yet, here he is making a claim so weak it borders on paranoia. Is it really dangerous to promote conversion? Where exactly is it dangerous for a Jew to suggest someone consider converting to Judaism? In Western countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, and much of Europe, freedom of religion is legally protected and culturally embedded. People change religions all the time, and not only is it legal, it is respected as a personal choice. Where are the reports of attacks or murders targeting converts to Judaism in the West? Where is the evidence that such activity puts the Jewish community at risk of retaliation? You can search through public records, hate crime databases, and even Wikipedia's article, List of Anti-Semitic Incidents in the United States, and you'll find no evidence that conversion advocacy is what provokes anti-Semitic acts. Hatred of Jews exists, tragically, but it is not caused by Jews inviting others to join them. So to say, it's dangerous to promote conversion is not just incorrect, it's irrational. It is closer to fear-mongering than any thoughtful risk assessment, and to imply that Jews must stay quiet about their faith lest they provoke others is a dangerous surrender to intimidation. Appeasing other religions? Well, the other religions don't like that. This is a shockingly weak reason to withhold truth, especially coming from a scholar. Since when do we base moral responsibility on whether other groups will approve? If that's the criteria, nobody would ever preach anything, because someone somewhere will always be offended. If Judaism sincerely believes that the Torah is divinely inspired, that its worldview is true, and that conversion is very good for a sincere seeker, then why should it stay silent simply because some other faiths may disapprove? Respectful dialogue is one thing. Silencing yourself out of fear that others won't like it is something else entirely, and it has no place in a religion that historically produced figures like Abraham, Moses, Maimonides, and countless others who spoke truth in defiance of the surrounding world.
We're tolerated all over the world because we're very small, and we're not threatening anybody.
This is historically false and politically naive. Jews are not tolerated in many places, regardless of their numbers. In fact, in much of the Islamic world, Jews were only tolerated historically when they were subjugated, as dhimmis, not because they were small, but because they were weak and degraded. Groups like Hamas do not care how many Jews exist. Their charter calls for extermination. In Iran, Yemen, and parts of North Africa, Jews were expelled or oppressed despite being tiny minorities. Jews were expelled from Christian lands despite being small in number. Even in the West, Jews are not tolerated because of their small numbers, but because of Western legal frameworks and cultural norms that protect freedom of belief and minority rights. In fact, many people overestimate the number of Jews globally, and it does not change their perception. So the idea that safety or tolerance depends on remaining small and quiet is not only factually incorrect, it is ethically cowardly. The real danger is not in speaking the truth. The real danger is refusing to share what you believe is good and meaningful, simply because it might provoke disapproval. What message does that send? That truth should stay hidden? That fear should dictate our ethics? That spiritual goodness must be kept secret to preserve safety? That is not just inconsistent with Jewish tradition, it is a betrayal of it. Instead of paranoia and appeasement, here's a better path. Be honest about the beauty and wisdom of Judaism. Respect others, but don't self-censor out of fear of them. Trust that sharing what you believe respectfully and truthfully is not dangerous. It is courageous.
But if we were to actively go out and challenge the major religions and try to pull people away from them, and although the verse in the book of Isaiah says we're supposed to be an or lagoyim, a light unto the nations, you don't have to risk your life for that. So typically we try to keep a low profile.
This is, without exaggeration, one of the most defeatist and disgraceful statements ever uttered by someone claiming rabbinic authority. To suggest that Jews should not fulfill the biblical mandate to be a light unto the nations because it might be risky is not only cowardly, it is a betrayal of the prophetic mission. Isaiah's call for Jews to be a light unto the nations, Isaiah 42:6, is not a suggestion, it is a divine charge. To downplay or outright abandon this charge because of imagined danger is spiritual negligence and corruption. It's also historically tone-deaf. The prophets, including Isaiah, faced real persecution, not hypothetical discomfort. According to Jewish tradition, Isaiah himself was martyred. Moses risked death returning to Egypt. Elijah was hunted. Jeremiah was imprisoned. These men risked everything to speak truth. That's what faith-driven leadership looks like. Contrast that with what we're hearing now. We try to keep a low profile. You're not in Babylon. You're not under Roman persecution. You're not being chased by the Inquisition. You are living in a liberal Western democracy where freedom of religion and expression are protected by law. And even here, where the risks are virtually non-existent, you advocate silence? That's not just cowardice. It's heresy, dressed in the language of caution. When hiding was justified, and when it is not. Of course, there are times in Jewish history where keeping a low profile made sense. The Bible itself gives examples. For when Jezebel had slaughtered the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 men per cave, providing them with food and water. 1 Kings 18:4. That was real danger, targeted extermination campaigns. Compare that to the West today, where Jews have complete freedom, where police protect synagogues, and where the president or prime minister will personally condemn any act of anti-Semitism. Can you even find one single example in recent Western history where someone was harmed for encouraging or facilitating conversion to Judaism? There is no danger. The fear is phantom. Jewish leadership should be brave. Scripture is filled with exhortations to be courageous. Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I dread? What happened to this spirit? What happened to Jewish pride? Courage? Mission? The great Jewish leaders didn't hide behind fears of offending others. They taught the truth boldly. And they didn't ask permission from other religions before doing so. The Lubavitcher Rebbe declared, "We are living in a time when there is no opposition to the spreading of Torah. If we really want to apply our energies, we will be successful and reach every Jew. Even within the darkness of Golus, all Israel will have light in their dwellings, and then we will greet Moshiach speedily in our days." Rabbi Jacob Emanuel Shoket similarly said, "Throughout most of post-biblical history, the Noahide commandments could not be widely promoted for the obvious reasons of the restraints of the Jewish exile, especially under the duress of the threats from non-Jewish religions who dominated the governments throughout the diaspora. These circumstances made it difficult even to apply the comment of Rabbi Yom Tov Lipman Heller that if we are ordained to promote observance of the Noahide Code, how much more so then to use friendly persuasion to lead the hearts of all to the will of their Creator. With few exceptions, this has led to neglect of this important aspect of Torah. Clearly, these restraints no longer apply, and this has been conducive to the development of the so-called Noahide movement. If ever there were a time to spread Judaism's teachings, it is now. There are no restraints, no threats, no excuses. Who's really doing the outreach? Look at the Christian world. They are much more fearless in promoting their beliefs. Whether you agree with them or not, they stand up, speak out, and put enormous energy into outreach. They send missionaries into war zones. They go door to door. They run TV channels, print Bibles, and produce documentaries to promote their views. That is courage. That is conviction. Meanwhile, Jews are busy making excuses. It's too dangerous. Other religions might get upset. Let's just keep a low profile. And then we wonder why Judaism has so little influence on the global stage compared to its spiritual depth. It's not because the message isn't powerful, it's because the messengers are silent. The final irony. The rabbi acknowledges earlier that conversion to Judaism is a very good thing, yet says we shouldn't promote it because it might offend others and cause danger, which is absurd. But I ask again, if it's good, why wouldn't you offer it? If it's true, why wouldn't you teach it? If being a light to the nations is divine will, why hide it? You cannot fulfill Isaiah's vision from the shadows. You cannot inspire the world while whispering behind closed doors. This attitude, that silence is safety, is not only false, it's spiritually corrosive. Judaism was never meant to be hidden. It is a faith built on public revelation, moral responsibility, and fearless truth-telling. To deny its mission to the world out of some vague, baseless fear is a betrayal of everything the prophets stood for. Let us stop making excuses. Let us stop being afraid of the dark. We are called to be the light.
If someone's interested, so you probably know the policy of responsible Jewish authorities, and that does exclude some, is to discourage them as much as possible, to make things difficult for them, not to show them any special sympathy. And if they then overcome that negative reception, of course, the ones who want to become Jewish, they know this already. They've learned this, they've been told this. Expect a rough time for the first few months, because they're... But and then in responsible circles, it takes at least a year, and in many places 3 to 5 years, before you'll be accepted for conversion. And the point of that is to discern their motivation, to make sure that the motivation really is to take part in the historical place of the Jewish people and the spiritual place of the Jewish people.
Let's call this what it is: needlessly cruel. Someone comes to you with sincere interest in Judaism, and your response is to give them a hard time and actively withhold special sympathy. Why? This is a person who may be on a deep and difficult spiritual journey. Many prospective converts are leaving Christianity, a religion they once trusted, which for many has led to pain, guilt, or betrayal. Now they're trying to piece their life back together, searching for purpose, for truth, for God, and they knock on Judaism's door. And instead of welcoming them, supporting them, guiding them with compassion, we're told to discourage them, to show them no special sympathy, to give them a rough time for months. This is not Jewish wisdom. This is human arrogance and stupidity dressed as religious policy. And frankly, it's a violation of Jewish moral tradition. As Rabbi Abraham Twersky pointed out, the Talmud says that Timnah, Amalek's mother, was a member of a royal family. She desired to convert to Judaism. However, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob each refused to convert her. She then said, "I prefer to be a maidservant, i.e. concubine, to this nation rather than a princess elsewhere." And she married Isaac's grandson, Eliphaz, the son of Esau. She then bore Amalek, who became the arch-enemy of Judaism, because Timnah had been rudely rejected. Sanhedrin 99b. We venerate the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we dare not be critical of them in any way. The Talmudic sages' veneration of the patriarchs far exceeded ours, yet they made the point of saying that the patriarchs should not have rudely rejected Timnah. R. Chaim Shmulevitz cites this Talmudic statement. He points out that Abraham was aggressive and tireless in bringing pagans to the realization of the true God. Abraham would convert the men, and Sarah would convert the women. Rashi, Genesis 12:5. This legacy was transmitted to Isaac and Jacob. If the patriarchs refused to accept Timnah when she asked to be converted, it was only after much deliberation which led them to conclude that she was not suitable for conversion. Without question, they were correct in their decision. However, the Talmud says, in refusing to accept her conversion, they should not have done it in a manner that she felt to be a rejection. Timnah's bitterness at being rejected was infused into Amalek, from whose venom Jews have continued to suffer throughout history. As we know, Haman was a descendant of Agag, king of the Amalekites. The cost of unkindness. Let that story sink in. Because of the way Timnah was rudely rejected, her bitterness manifested in Amalek, whose hatred of the Jewish people has echoed through centuries of suffering, culminating in enemies like Haman and others who've tried to destroy us. All of that, rooted in the pain of someone who wanted to join the Jewish people, and was turned away without compassion. You think giving someone a rough time for months or years is harmless? You think treating sincere seekers with suspicion builds a stronger Jewish nation? It doesn't. It breeds resentment. It squashes spiritual journeys. It sends good people away, sometimes forever. This needs to end. How long should conversion take? 1 to 2 years of sincere learning? Reasonable. Time to understand holidays, laws, culture? Sure. But 5 years? That's madness. That's not discernment. That's gatekeeping for its own sake. If someone has shown sincerity, studied deeply, taken on observance, and built Jewish community ties, why on earth would you delay them just to test them further? The process should be joyful, not traumatic. Learning Torah should be a joy, not a punishment. Discovering Judaism should heal, not humiliate. Why not greet sincere seekers with warmth, curiosity, and support? Why not let them enjoy the process instead of bracing for abuse? If someone's only motivation is marriage, or social pressure, or curiosity, that becomes obvious quite early. You don't need 5 years to figure that out. If, on the other hand, they're truly devoted, why would you keep them out? You don't want to proselytize? Okay, but when someone comes to us, shouldn't we at least treat them with human decency? Giving someone a rough time for no good reason is not spiritual wisdom. It's bullying, and it's wrong. And if Jewish wisdom ever seems to justify it, you can be sure it's a corruption.
But we're certainly not going to go out and try to convince people to do that. Now, the same thing holds true to a great extent for convincing them to live up to the Jewish laws for non-Jews, because typically that will mean giving up practicing the religions they're practicing.
Speak for yourself. I will fulfill my obligations to the nations, and as Esther said, if I perish, I perish. The prophets consistently mocked other religious views in attempts to get people to abandon idolatry. The insults against other religions are codified in the Bible for all to see. I am not saying we should insult without wisdom, but we must expose falsehood, especially damaging falsehood. Expose darkness and replace it with light.
So, from the point of view of those religions, it doesn't matter to them too much whether the person ends up with a 6-pointed star around his neck keeping Shabbos, or just abandoned his church and disbelieves in the tenets of his church and keeps the laws of the children of Noah. For him, they lost a member. And they, from their point of view, mean he's eternally damned, and and we caused that. So again, there's no responsibility for us to court danger for the sake of this project.
So now it becomes clear. He's not talking about radical Islamists or violent extremists. He's afraid of Christians. Are you serious? Is this 2025 or 1255? You're telling me in the modern Western world, with religious freedom, freedom of expression, legal protections, and overwhelmingly peaceful Christian communities, you're afraid that Christians will retaliate against Jews because someone left the church and became a Noahide or a Jew? That's not just paranoid. It's delusional. There is no evidence that Christians in America, Australia, or any Western country attack Jews for receiving converts. If anything, many Christians are actively supportive of Jews in Israel, some even more supportive than Jews themselves. And you really think these people are going to form an angry mob because someone decided to keep Shabbos? Let's flip the question. Even if, in some bizarro world version of Christianity, they did get upset, so what? Let's ask the deeper question. What about your theology? What happens to non-Jews who don't follow the Noahide code? What's their fate? Is there no spiritual consequence? Do you think God just shrugs his shoulders at violations of his will and religion, so to speak? If these people are in moral and spiritual danger, don't you care about them? Wouldn't you want to at least offer guidance and show them a better way? Or is your love so shallow that it evaporates the moment things get a little risky? That's not to say I believe Christians go to hell any more than other groups, but from his perspective, they are at risk, at least if he is consistent. This is not thought through. How is it possible that after decades of study, this rabbi has not worked through the basic ethical implications of his own beliefs? If Judaism teaches that there is real meaning to righteousness, to truth, to divine law, then surely we should want others to access that meaning. Surely we should offer the world what light we have, just as we would hope they offer us what light they found. There is no responsibility to court danger for this project. Fine. If you're under real persecution, if you're behind enemy lines, if the Inquisition is knocking on your door. But here, in the free world, the only thing you're courting is cowardice.
On the other hand, I will say, when we had our own state in this part of the world's geography, we were responsible to make sure that every person who lives in our land lives as the way the Torah wants them to live, Jewish or non-Jewish. And that meant that if you lived here, you had to live up to those laws. There's no way that you could avoid it. So it's not as if we don't take responsibility for it.
Well, isn't that just wonderful? In the tiny land of Israel, that's where the wisdom of Judaism will take root. Forget the rest of the world. Forget being a light to the nations. Just help Israel. This is not Judaism, or at least it shouldn't be. The great Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan of blessed memory wrote, "But being chosen is more of a responsibility than a mere privilege, and Israel has the incessant mission of proclaiming God's teachings to the world. God thus speaks to us through his prophet, Isaiah 42:6. The Lord have called you in righteousness, and have set you as a covenant of the people for a light to the nations." Israel's mission is to bear witness to God, as again we find, Ebed 43:10. You are my witnesses, says the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen. We are thus taught that Israel is like the heart of humanity, constantly beating and infusing all mankind with faith in God and his teachings. This universal message was often to be proclaimed even at the price of suffering and persecution. The Midrash tells us that Israel is likened to an olive tree, for just as an olive must be crushed to bring forth its oil, so Israel is often persecuted before its light shines forth. The Talmud teaches us that even the dispersion of Israel among the nations was primarily to teach the world how to serve God. How radically different is the message of Rabbi Kaplan to what we have heard so far?
It's the place that it has in the practicality of our lives and in the hierarchy of our concerns. When there are millions of Jews who aren't living up to the responsibilities of Jews, that's a much more serious spiritual problem for us and for the world than it is that there are billions of non-Jews who aren't living up to the Jewish responsibilities for non-Jews. So in terms of the priority of our efforts, we're going to put the priority into other Jews rather than into non-Jews.
This is not just short-sighted, it's morally confused and strategically stupid. The claim that the spiritual failures of Jews are more serious than those of billions of non-Jews reflects a kind of insular tribalism that is neither consistent with logic nor supported by Scripture. Let's start with basic strategy. The idea that outreach should be focused almost exclusively within, because the internal issues are more serious, is exactly why Judaism has failed to make a moral and theological impact on the wider world in modern times. If you're trying to fix a ship that's sinking and someone offers you a crew, wood, and tools, you don't say, "Well, sorry, you're not from our original crew, so we'll have to decline." That's exactly what Judaism has done for centuries. It's chosen isolation over integration, even at the cost of its own survival and influence. So-called outsiders have a lot to offer us, and we have a lot to offer them. Numbers matter. The phrase, "there is strength in numbers," isn't just a motivational slogan. It's a principle found in Torah. As Leviticus 26:8 teaches, 5 of you will pursue 100, and 100 of you will pursue 10,000, and your enemies will fall by the sword before you. This is divine arithmetic and common sense. The more righteous people you have, the greater your impact. That applies whether they were born Jewish or came to the truth from outside. The fact is, if Judaism had taken conversion seriously and embraced righteous non-Jews over the last 2,000 years, there would be millions more Jews today, and they in turn would have brought countless others. Jews would not be so outnumbered in global conversations. They would not be as easily marginalized, and they would have built a stronger, more diverse, and more dynamic moral community. The world is interconnected. You want to help the Jewish people? Help the nations around them. Jeremiah 29:7 says it perfectly. Seek the prosperity of the city to which I have sent you as exiles. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for if it prospers, you too will prosper. If the non-Jewish world is suffering from moral collapse, spiritual confusion, and ethical relativism, that is not just their problem, it becomes our problem. Because chaos spreads, war spreads, lies spread, bad ideas spread, and the consequences of all those problems spread to everyone, Jews included. So to pretend like the moral or spiritual condition of 8 billion people doesn't affect the Jewish people is to live in complete denial of global reality. If you truly want to secure the future of the Jewish people, you should be advocating for a better world, including among non-Jews. And promoting Jewish values does lead to a better world. Failure to promote those values means people will absorb different, and most certainly worse values. Theology and logic are not in conflict. Let's be clear. Judaism has always had a universal message. The prophets spoke to the nations. The Psalms praise God among the nations. Isaiah tells us we are to be a light unto the nations. That's not optional. It's a command, not just because it helps others, but because it helps us. Isolationism is not piety, it's fear. Rejecting the opportunity to uplift the non-Jewish world is not righteousness. It's selfishness that has and will continue to backfire on us. The more righteous people there are, Jew or non-Jew, the better the world becomes, and the more secure the Jewish people become. This entire attitude, that non-Jews are a lower priority, is backwards. Not just spiritually, but strategically. It shows a lack of vision, a failure to understand the world we live in, and a detachment from the divine mandate to elevate humanity. If you care about Judaism, about truth, about influence, then you cannot afford to ignore the non-Jewish world. Don't succumb to imaginary fears that have no basis in statistical reality. The Bible emphasizes that paranoia is a trait of the wicked, not the righteous. As it says in Proverbs 28:1, the wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. And in Leviticus 26:17, and I will set my face against you, so that you will be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you will rule over you, and you will flee when no one pursues you. Fleeing non-existent threats is a punishment for the wicked, not a reality for the righteous. This should be a giant wake-up call to anyone pushing imaginary fears. A lot more can and will be said, but we will leave it there. If you found this video thought-provoking, or if it challenged some long-held assumptions, that's the point. Clear thinking, not blind tradition. If you appreciated the insights, like, subscribe, and visit my website, Radical Universe. Thank you.